renegotiating the terms and conditions of the contract. And there may be other things that come out of those negotiations that the city council may want to take a look at before, the city manager signs the agreement.
So you're saying keep it in?
My recommendation would be to keep number 3 in, to bring it back to the city council for approval for the modifications.
The risk that I see is time running and our winding up being in a less advantageous place in the market. We had instructed staff based upon the 20% to do all of this. I think it's as simple as resetting this new quantity of money. Maybe I'm missing something. We already had instructed staff on the basis of 20%.
I just know that when you get into the negotiations and you start redrafting provisions in the contract, I mean, maybe it would be to say return to the city council if there are some substantial new terms that come out of the negotiations or something like that.
Well, the key item that was in the original agreement was that the county was going to make additional deposits if those funds were necessary. So that's really one of the key things that I think that's been the stumbling block all along.
So if we rely
that was
on
item 3 of the original agreement.
If we rely on the county, what sort of instrument would we want from the county?
But they're not. They're not. Are they balking at that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're not agreeing to that, Mr.
No,
Crane.
it is the county. As I understand it, the way this works is ownership makes their deal with the county, and the county makes the deal with us.
correct. And the revised agreements that I received back from the county were all modified key elements of this existing agreement that I thought was imprudent for me to modify further without discussing with the city attorney. So if if we can next week meet and see what we can hammer out on the basis of this discussion tonight with the city attorney, I can call a special meeting of council. We can bring it back, so it allows us to go forward with the bidding process. I know that's what all parties desire.
Councilmember Thomas.
Could we also authorize, alternatively authorize you to proceed without calling a special meeting based on a satisfactory ironing out of points of discussion? Is that too vague?
Well, of course you can. I mean, again, I think my only concern is that without knowing all of the parties and being very unfamiliar with this, if there are new negotiations that result in substantially different terms than what is already in the agreement, do you give carte blanche authority to your city manager to negotiate that, or do you want it to come back to the council for approval? I would think that you'd want it to come back to the council for approval.
Councilmember Broden.
Why don't we, I just propose, why don't we do that? That would only be 2 weeks. They're going to have their meeting next week, and Mr. Rapport doesn't return till Saturday, so they couldn't even discuss it anyway till
Well, next Monday.
right. So it would be just in time, hope for the next meeting. So it doesn't seem like it would hurt. And if it's on the agenda and it's not substantially different and it's consistent with what we've discussed, we probably won't spend much time talking about it.
I'm not concerned about the time talking about it. I'm concerned about the time between the steps that may disadvantage us.
No, I'm just saying that the next meeting would coincide pretty well with the time that they, that the city manager and the city attorney could get together to redraft something consistent with our discussion. and it would be, 2 days later, we'd be having a meeting, or, the following week, we'd be having a meeting. So it doesn't sound like it would hold up the process, just having the contract come back.
Sooner is better than later.
Councilmember Crane, will you explain what, in our negotiations with the county, what we would be striving to achieve or gain from the county? According to your,
The county's the one the agreement's with.
right, but here we're asking for a 20%,
Right. And so and the county's looking to ownership to be the source of those funds. Ownership, after the meeting that I participated in, one of the members of ownership contacted me and said that he had agreed to $100,000 and had spoken to a member of staff in that regard,
one owner?
that one owner would deliver that
Extra 20,000?
letter of
Oh.
credit. All right, so that gives us more than 10%, but less than the 20. We had said to the city manager and the city engineer, proceed, and the city attorney, proceed as long as the agreement with the county covers the 20%. And I view this meeting today as saying, all right, instead of 20%, base it on $100,000. That being the only real change. And what's been said here tonight is, by city manager, there are some points in the proposed agreement between the county and the city that are being suggested to be revised, and she wants the city attorney who drafted this to consider those before proceeding. And I understand that, and I accept that. But I'm hoping there's a way for this to proceed once that's accomplished, rather than having to come back to us again.
Yes.
This was always going to come back to us.
The only way it was coming back to us, as I understand it, was at the point of award, at which point the county, we, and ownership would know how much the bridge was going to cost. That was the next time we were going to see it, based upon our instructions at the previous meeting. So if all we're doing is resetting the amount of money to 100,000 and resetting it so instead of a deposit, it is some other form of securitization, then why does it need to come back to us?
Yeah.
How about we just, I think you had said this before, that if it's that simple of a change, fine, go ahead. If there's anything more substantial, please bring it back.
It's my fault. Maybe I wasn't clear enough, because
Is that what
if
you
all
s-
we're doing is modifying the percentage and changing the deposit to a letter of credit or some other type of security, then I don't see any reason for it to come back to the city council.
But if there is something
But-
more substantial, it could
Well,
come.
we're moving from $200,000 contingency to $100,000 contingency. That is, to me, unbelievably substantial.
Well, remember, we had a member of another community's council, had served on another community's council for years and years, and said that he hadn't seen this sort of a percentage in his years on that council. And I don't remember seeing this sort of a percentage in other projects either. Typically, it's 10%. So the 20% was a little bit out of the box, but 10% is pretty darn typical.
I think I might be in the minority here, but I think it's time to maybe try to craft a motion. And while they're thinking about a motion, I just want to say, I'm still not sure what's in it for the city in the short and/or the long run. I'm not